So the next step is to, okay, we've talked about the flipped classroom, we've talked about the essential elements, and now I'm going to use that to kind of move into this place about a sample online project that I did and talk about kind of just to give you a window into what that looks like. So let's first start with the significant content. Well, I told you that I taught a lot of different courses, and for this project, I'm just going to give you an example. I taught a Flash animation and game design course. And what happened was, so there was a game design course, and they were learning skills with the software of Multimedia Fusion, and and then they were also learning skills in Flash, the program of Flash. Really great class, and they use Flash to do all kinds of great stuff, and Multimedia Fusion to create great games for different purposes. Now, as you know, for many of you people out there that have taught online, a lot of the curriculum is handed to you, and you don't have very much power in what is there. The learning targets are selected, the assessments are selected, and as well as kind of the lessons and design of the overall thing. It's been designed by somebody, and it's given to you. And that's part of kind of how it was for me. Modules were set up where students had specific learning targets in either Flash or Multimedia Fusion, and they had to create some sort of assessment that showed them that they knew all those things, and they had lectures and all those things. Well, what I did is to supplement that, to have the complementary, I guess, piece with it, is I created group collaborative products and projects that students would work on together to show the same skills for that module. So if they were doing certain types of motion tweens, expanding, showing, certain types of things, then I made sure that I was creating a project that did the same thing, that showed that that showed the same skills, but in this case, I built the authenticity and had them work together. So how did I have them work together, for example? My focus was for 21st century skills. It was collaboration. That was my big one. But so in addition to communication, where they would communicate with each other and ultimately present their things to a panel, that was another 21st century skill. A way I did it for collaborative pieces, they would Google, when they were working on their designs and brainstorming their ideas, they'd work on Google Docs to brainstorm. When they were working on their storyboards example for their games, they would do that also on Google Docs. When they needed to problem solve issues, they would post their things on Edmodo. I had a great rule called Ask 3 before me. I'm sure many of you use that. Oh, yeah, a teacher says, yes, I do that rule. Ask 3 before me. Great rule. I'm glad you like it. And so what I do is they would have to post their question, whether it was about content, whether it was about something that had to do with the project, whatever. They had to post it on there, and 3 other students had to answer that question on Edmodo before I would respond, because I wanted students to kind of collaborate together on that problem-solving thing. So again, there was that, and again, so I would have 3 students in a group working together using these tools to create either a Flash game, an animation, or a Multimedia Fusion game that was geared toward the learning target. So those were my 21st century skills and how I did it. So again, for their public audience, an important element, again, these projects were for somebody else. I had a couple companies write letters for the Flash Kids, for example, and said, hey, we are looking for a really exciting new logo. Our logo is boring. We don't like it. We have some pictures for you and some resources, and we need to talk with you about what we're looking for, and we want you to create a great logo that will excite people and make them, think our company's cool. So that's what they did for Flash. For Flash game design as well as game design, they had different things. Like a company said, we need just a new game that does these things. Like I had a local company, Valve, which is located in my area, which is in Seattle, and I had a couple colleagues there that I said, hey, would you be willing to give some feedback to some kids on their games, just in their overall structure? And they were very excited. They loved working with kids, and they wrote emails to them and said, hey, we need your help. And then also I had, for instance, one of their projects was designing a game that kind of advertised to school, because this online school was all about 21st century kind of technology, and they were going to create a game that not only was a great game and showed what great work students did, but it also advertised. So again, the audience was somebody else. It wasn't just for me. It was out there in the world. And so I encourage you, ask around. You never know who's out there and who's going to help you. So you really got to, reach out there, send an email to a colleague or to a business and say, hey, would you be willing to write letters and ask for help? So along with that are driving questions. Remember, these were for the kids to really engage them in in the project, and it really summarized what we were doing. So our driving question for the Flash kids was, how do we create a new logo for a company? Pretty straightforward. For one of the other game design kids was, how do we create a model game that advertises the awesomeness of our school? Again, wanted to do that, and then of course, and that letter was from the school itself. And then the other driving question was, how could we as game designers make a game together? And that really came out of, I'm sure you know that in the game design world, students create games together, or rather people, like professionals, create those games together. I wanted to mimic and mirror that experience, because a lot of times in the online world, our students, the genius of it is students do get to work at their own pace, and by themselves. But that also can cause, people talk about, hey, how do kids interact with each other? Well, that's what I want to do with these projects. I wanted some interaction. I wanted them to not just work by themselves, but interact with each other in a great new way. So I had them, that was my driving questions and our framework for our project. So how did I create a need to know? Well, part of that was the entry event, and I also showed them some videos of just really bad logos and really bad games to kind of say, gosh, these are terrible, right? Ugh. Okay, and so this is a graphic that I used to kind of show the process to you of how it happened, and I'll talk about where these things happen. So I said, I did an entry event, that's great. I introduced the project tasks, we did the need to know activity, and then what I did is see these lessons and content, on content or activities and learning experiences, most of those direct lessons occurred in the actual learning module on the learning management system. And so I said, okay guys, great, now go and watch do that activity on motion tweens, or go and watch that lecture on effective game designs, or go and watch the YouTube video on this. And so they would go and do those things. Or maybe they need a lesson in my live classroom experience. If as an online teacher you have your live classroom things. But if we're in the hybrid classroom, for example, this is the great opportunity to have them go home and learn some of the content through different modes, whether they're videos, recorded lectures, or labs and tutorials. And then the drafting of the project work can happen in the classroom. But in my full online classroom, let me tell you, they actually, after doing a couple lessons, would come to the live meeting next week, and they would have to work together. This was part of our collaborative time to either show their drafts, to generate ideas, and then again revisit the need to know and say, hey, what more do you need to know? And they would come up, well, gosh, we don't know how to make our logo expand and get bigger and smaller. I said, that's really great, really smart. I want you to return to those modules and go back and find the lesson on that. Lesson 4. Go to lesson 4. And so they would continue and go to lesson 4. And again, this process would go on, where they would visit things in the module and then come to class prepared to do things with it and draft, and then go back and forth. So that's how I created kind of the inquiry, because they continue to ask questions and then go back and watch the lessons and then work on it in class, etc., etc. So that's kind of how you create the need to know in-depth inquiry. I really encourage you to rethink, how are you using your live class time, and how can you use your modules and learning management system effectively. I really believe that you've got to use those live class meetings as collaborative work time to meet students where they're at, to do remedial work, to collaborate, to draft, to brainstorm. That's really what the live classroom time needs to be, not just push out a lecture, although sometimes mini lectures can be very important. In addition, revision and reflection. I used a modified Critical Friends protocol for my students, where they presented their project and they said, hey, here's what we got. We asked clarifying questions. The audience then engaged in a very structured feedback where they said good stuff. Kids would get on the microphone. As you know, I used Illuminate, was my tool for my live classroom sessions. So they would get on Illuminate and they would present their ideas, and then we would go through things we liked, things we're concerned about, and then gave them suggestions, and the presenters would then reflect on it either in writing in an email to me or to their peers, or maybe during the live session. It depended on when I wanted it to happen. But this was something that we used multiple times along the way, and this occurred either in a live session, either on Edmodo, either on a Google Doc, but it can occur in many places. But you've got to do Critical Friends and or any sort of revision and reflection tools multiple times and in different places along the project. Student voice and choice. Well, what do you think? I mean, if we go back to these driving questions really quick, where they're creating a new logo for a company, a model game, and creating games together for game design as game designers, I'm sure you can see that there was a lot of voice and choice. They met the same learning targets, but they could show it in different ways. All the logos were different because they were different companies. All the games had different creativity around it to advertise for the school, and the games that they created together as game designers were, of course, very different. So again, I wanted to make sure that they could show the same learning targets in creative ways, and it was very natural with these types of software skill-based things and tools and courses. I do want to talk about really briefly about an example learning management system. I think you've got to make sure that your structures match the PBL environment. You've really got to make sure that it does that. So Project Foundry is one of those, and they really try to walk the walk and talk the talk at the same time. There are PBL learning management system structure that's out there that really helps teachers do the project management part, as well as students to be able to do it, to create a portfolio of work and make sure that everything is personalized. So something you need to know about Project Foundry is it's a way to kind of synthesize all the great tools that are out there. It's a great thing. You can use VoiceThread, VT up here. You can use Moodle. You can use Google Docs or any other Apple-type software, or anything else that's out there that you know works with your kids will work with Project Foundry. So it's just a tool to help. And again, you know what tools are going to work. You've got to make sure the tools meet the needs. And so Project Foundry provides a really good structure of kind of synthesizing great PBL essential elements. So, along with that, you can make sure you can post your project up there for what course it is, individual reading. You can make sure to capture the journey, so to speak, of the project through different things like podcasts that kids put out, through documents and checklists and quizzes. And students can, of course, reflect, which is an important element of PBL, as I just said, in terms of their standards. And it really helps to kind of make sure you do that. And just an example of a student homepage, it shows, when things are due. Either those are literally assignments. It also talks about important, community, like this is the part of the project, a community service proposal. So here, or pre-proposal, or an independent reading project. So it shows those important things that are up there for students, along with where you can log time, add tasks. Students have control over this, as do teachers, so that you can make sure to, that there is co-work together in the classroom. So just along with that, they did offer to me, that if you're interested in learning about what they do, it is not a free service, but if you mention my name, Andrew Miller, they would be happy to give you a 50% off the startup fee. They want to make sure to help PBL out. They're very engaged in the big national conversation. They do work with all kinds of schools. By the way, I do not get a cut of this. I'm just doing it because, again, I like to say that what works in education, and Project Foundry is, again, one of those learning management systems. I use Moodle, just so you know. I did use Moodle when I did it, and because it was flexible, so it can work. So, but I just got to say this again, that you got to make sure that your learning management system allows for the essential elements of PBL to shine. Because let's be honest, if we look at a lot of the traditional curriculum out there, it's not PBL in the online world. It's not. And so if you look at the structures, it looks like the traditional Sage on the stage, where it's very much read, turn in assessment, and you're done. Not a lot of inquiry, not a lot of student voice and choice. There's some good performance assessments, and there are some good things coming out there. But again, I would say that we've got to do better, and so we want to make sure that our learning management systems do that.